Good evening, YouTube. Tire Metalhead Weatherman here. Hope you guys are doing well. We got a stacked one here tonight. This one is covering the severe weather event, and there have been a few uptrends as of late too, so that's very concerning. And then there's also the threat of that wintry storm, which will most likely be named Quest by the Weather Channel, by the way. So while I'm at it, I'm actually going to go ahead and take a quick look at the snowfall analysis over the last 48 hours. Because really that system started Sunday with the severe weather threat, and I haven't really properly given its just due. So give me 1 second here. So here we are looking at the snowfall over the last 48 hours. We've seen a little activity over towards the UP of Michigan, northern Wisconsin, and a small portion of Minnesota. Totals have been moderately impressive, about 4 to 6 inches in a lot of areas. And then the same can be said around the New York City area even. We're getting about 4 to 6 inches. That last snowstorm was pretty significant, and of course it got overshadowed by the severe weather outbreak we had over here towards Texas and Oklahoma, especially with Oklahoma City getting hit by what was a very notable tornado. I'm hearing rumor reports of EF2 to EF3 damage. I haven't gotten any confirmation yet on exactly what the rating will be. I think that's still pending the engineering on houses. It's funny how the enhanced Fujita scale works. But going back over towards the west, where we have ongoing winter weather, we have areas across the mountains getting up to 2 to 3 feet of snow. Big winners, of course, are mainly going to be across the Sierra Nevada, where we could see 3 to 4 feet easily, and isolated higher totals already within the last 48 hours, and more to come, as we're starting to see a little bit of a trend towards that atmospheric river type pattern. Multiple storm systems should be coming through that area, and given the cold air that's already set in place, we're probably going to be seeing more snow. It's almost guaranteed. That being said, let's shift back over to the severe weather threat, and then we'll look at the models and try to cover both as best as we can here. So one uptrend that we have for today is actually for tomorrow's slight risk. Well, tomorrow's slight risk. Yesterday, this was just marginal. There was I saw some chance of it being upgraded to slight, but I wasn't too sold on it due to the forcing available. But there was a good moisture plume over this region. It looks like over the last couple of runs here, and I was starting to see a little bit of a trend towards maybe seeing a slight risk. But over the course of the morning, we've had an uptrend on the model, so the confidence became a little bit greater to the point where a slight risk was necessary across this area from Jackson, Tennessee, all the way over towards eastern Texas here, or northeastern Texas. So from Jackson to Little Rock, there's a corridor over here where we could see some severe weather. All three hazards are possible, actually, and there's actually a little bit of a significant hail threat. With that subtle forcing also comes lapse rates, and lapse rates are a key factor when it comes to both tornadic and hail development. These storms are also going to be in a very discrete mode, so this isn't going to be a widespread event. It's going to be a small corridor right here where we could have but we could end up having some really intense storms because the parameters are definitely there. We already talked about the warm and moist sector being over this region being pretty stout, so this is very much legit in a lot of ways in regards to potency. The forcing was always going to be the question with this. I don't necessarily know for sure if I could see a threat to an upgrade to the I can't speak. An upgrade to an enhanced risk, but I'm not going to rule it out at this point because what I've seen on the most recent models, and I'm going to show you that in just a minute here, there's a decent bit of low-level jet energy, and forcing is subtle enough to where we can get some storms to form through the cracks, so to speak. Then we have the following day with a very large enhanced risk area, and I do see a slight potential of this maybe being upgraded to moderate. This enhanced risk has also grown in size too now. We now have Dallas and Waco in that enhanced risk. And this is stretched a little bit further south. We have Alexandria in there. We don't have the rest of the boot or heel of Louisiana involved in there, but it's something to watch really closely. That slight risk is also expanded notably here. Now we have San Antonio and Houston. Well, we have Houston in place. San Antonio's still off to the west, but they're now in that marginal risk as well. Springfield, you're in there too. There's a marginal risk for some severe storms there. Nashville, you're in there too. Chattanooga, and just to the west of Atlanta, we're watching you too. Columbus, Georgia's in there, and numerous other cities. I think all the hazard types are possible with this. I think this is going to be the biggest day. This is probably going to be the day that I'm intending to live stream, but hopefully, this is going to be a little bit questionable considering what time I end up getting off of work. If I get off of work on time, I'm definitely going to be able to cover the event in full. I may end up running a little late. I do also kind of want to cover Wednesday's event, but I'm going to have to see how things play out here. The timing of when storms will fire is going to be a key factor in all of that. Friday, I'm looking to live stream as well because we have a very large slight risk right here, and I do see room for an upgrade, maybe even towards southern Georgia, parts of Birmingham as well. I'm not so sure about you, Atlanta. I think we're going to remain at a slight risk for right now, but we will be looking at the models very closely over the next couple of days because a lot of you guys that do follow me live here, of course, considering that fact that I live here. So definitely need to be watching the weather over the course of the next couple of days, especially across the south. I do also see potential for a little bit of severe weather to stretch a little further north here, towards maybe eastern Kentucky. So I'm watching you guys extra close as well. You aren't in that slight risk yet, but I can't rule it out. Marginal risk definitely seems a little bit more likely, but we'll have to see how things play out here. South Carolina, I'm watching you extra close, and towards the Appalachian Mountains, Asheville, Charlotte, I'm watching you too for the threat of severe weather on Friday. Could be multiple rounds of this based off of what I've seen on the models. So let's go ahead and now take a look. Of course, we'll start out with a vorticity map. You're going to get a good idea of what the forcing will be like over the next couple of days. We'll start out with Wednesday, of course. And this is how far back our storm system is. It's still over California at this point. The low's starting to really deepen, though. This is a very strong low pressure, so significant rain, snow, mostly snow possible across the mountain ranges here. And some areas further to the east. We're a little bit warm just out ahead of this, so we're going to start out as rain. We could end up shifting over to snow as time goes on. But of course, as I've mentioned before, a very abundant warm sector has developed across this region. And you see how these isobars are spread out right here? This is representative of very subtle forcing. This forcing is going to be sufficient enough with this moisture plume that we're going to end up seeing right here. I have EpicPen back up now today. So right around this corridor where we were mentioning earlier, you can already see a little bit of activity here. That's moisture coming in. As a result, when you go forward on this, watch what ends up happening. We get that warm and moist sector acting over these regions. These storms will start to fire, and the threat for severe takes off from there on Wednesday. The timing of this will be right around the time I get off work, so it'll be a race for me to get home and see what happens here. If these storms fire at all, because again, subtle forcing means there's usually a cap in place, and if there's a cap in place, subtle forcing sometimes isn't going to be enough to do it. You need some kind of lifting mechanism to remove that. So 50-50 shot on whether or not this develops. Otherwise, you can see an uptick in the threat level. We could even see an enhanced risk from this. Excuse me. And then, so we head into Thursday. Here is where things really start to develop here. This really strong trough really takes shape here at this point. Really starts to deepen around this and form a really strong center. This is a partially negatively tilted trough here, but there is a lot of moisture heading into this region here. So by Thursday afternoon, we can expect some pretty intense weather starting to develop. Could already start to see a squall line before about maybe 6 o'clock across areas like Dallas. It's around here, though. It's around this region I'm about to mark here that I'm really concerned about tornadic activity. Right around here. That's why I think the highest threat for tornadoes is going to be in this corridor. could be an isolated pocket right about here within this pocket that I'm creating where I'm really concerned about tornadic activity. It's going to be a very similar deal to what we saw on Sunday, but a much more organized event in regards to the lift and all the other parameters. Last time, storms were pretty much formed on the dry line, and that's why we mostly saw a line of thunderstorms. Occasionally, we would see discrete cells pop out of that. But with this setup, the dry line's a little bit further back, but the forcing and other parameters are in enough abundance to where this is going to become a problem well out ahead of that main line of storm. So we could also see multiple rounds of this. So all in all, Thursday definitely looks like it's going to be the biggest day out of the three. But we cannot sleep on Friday because as we move this forward, it's a pretty similar deal. They're still forcing, but it's still very subtle, especially across areas like Atlanta and some areas towards South Georgia, Alabama too, and some of these areas over here towards Kentucky and Tennessee. And this is heading into early Friday afternoon, so this is going to pick up as the day goes on. And then as we move forward, we still have enough moisture being pulled in to where we have to keep an eye on the Carolinas through the early part of the evening. And just as quick as that storm system comes in, it heads out, and then the severe threat will be over. And it's pretty much the same on all three of the models here that I'm looking at. That was the Euro we just saw. Here is the NAM. The NAM actually has an even more impressive look on it, especially even for Wednesday. Look at this little moisture plume that pops up here earlier in the day. Forcing is just as subtle. But what ends up happening is I think that threat line moves a little bit further to the north. So that's a little bit of a variance, but not much. And then, of course, Thursday just looks really intense as it stands right now. Threat seems a little bit more shifted to the north with the NAM. That's just a trend that I've been seeing with it over the last day and a half. And then, of course, it's the same deal with Friday. We see plenty of forcing over this region. This is mainly going to be a mixture of discrete cells and then that squall line coming through later. And then when we look towards the GFS, it's a similar look. We have a crazy setup as we head into Thursday. Wednesday, we're kind of leaning into that same type of look that we had with the Euro, but a little bit more stronger. Kind of leans with the NAM as far as intensity is concerned, but it holds a little bit more consistent with what we were seeing from the Storm Prediction Center. And then Thursday, sheesh, just look at all this mess. Here's where our squall line is, and there's still good chance of storms developing out ahead of it. This also could pose a nocturnal threat. And then, of course, as we head into the day on Friday, very strong forcing here, but subtle enough to where towards central and maybe eastern Georgia, we could have a severe threat with maybe all hazards possible as well. And then off we go as we get into Saturday. So another thing to keep note of here is the low-level jet. And this is where I'm really concerned about things, because with that subtle forcing, these storms aren't going to compete with each other quite like they did on Sunday over towards Texas and Oklahoma. And what ends up happening when we have that going on, along with the low-level jet being in proper abundance, we're more likely to get tornadoes. So what ends up happening here is that low-level jet, and this is on the Euro, we get up to that 40-knot range that we would typically look for right across this area. But I think the timing with the Euro is a little different than the others. But look what happens as we head into Thursday. Here comes that low, and look at the area that's created right here. 50 to 60 knot jet, more than sufficient enough to produce severe weather and for a lengthy period of time. And of course, with it being a low-level jet, we have winds moving in a different direction in comparison to the storm system at the upper levels moving this direction. So we already have our speed and directional shear all here. So as we move that forward, that low level jet maximum exists across Alabama and Georgia as we head into Friday afternoon, which ultimately is a very concerning look. I've seen some classical setups look just like this. We'll have to see how things develop here, but this is not a good sign. Let's hope that this somehow downtrends, because we don't want to see what could happen here with all the other ingredients that we have in place. So this is heading into Friday night. Threat exists across South Carolina and New York, but for the most part, I think, or North Carolina, or both of the Carolinas. And then off we go. After that, we switch this over to the NAM and get that going if my computer will work with me. Just when you think you have it set up, you don't. Okay, there we go. But it's a pretty similar look. This is heading into Wednesday afternoon. A couple of areas around the low-level jet develop, get to that 40-knot range. Like I said, this corridor right here is probably the one that I'm most suspicious of as of right now. I'm thinking that maybe this region right here could have the greatest chance of tornadoes out of all the other regions. If there's going to be an enhanced risk, it's going to be a very small one. But I'm thinking somewhere either where I drew the circle or an expansion point right here could be a point where we end up seeing an increased tornado threat. But as time goes on, it's a pretty similar deal. Okay, I don't know. Oh, that's why. Makes sense. So now that we've looked at that, move this further forward. The similar look heading into Wednesday night, Thursday morning. Here's Thursday afternoon into Friday. Very dangerous look right here, especially up against that low pressure right there. Right across this region, we could see some nocturnal storms develop, and then, like I said, pretty similar look heading into Friday. Very dangerous look nonetheless. Again, I'm hoping that downtrends, because that could be a very dangerous setup, very big cause of some really big problems. So let's go to the GFS, make our comparison with that, and similar look. But the low-level jet is just as strong, maybe a little bit stronger with the GFS over the other models. Actually, I think the NAM was more impressive. But nonetheless, it's pretty much potato at this point, as 60-knot jet by early afternoon hours across the metro Atlanta area, metro Birmingham, and with the other parameters in place, could be some fireworks in store for sure. We make our comparison, and now the main thing to look at here, really nothing to see here with the dew points. We already know what's going on thanks to yesterday's video. But one thing I want you to note is those wind barbs. If you compare the last model here, I'm going to move this back just a skosh. Here we are looking at Thursday afternoon. Notice how this wind barb right here where I'm pointing at is going this direction. Watch what happens as I switch this over to the Euro and we look at this moisture plume and how it surges in a slightly different direction. So this is already an indicator that we have low level shear here. And look, there's even some change of direction all the way over towards this way. So if you really think about it, it's as simple as this. Oops, I didn't mean to go back that far. But if you really think about it, look at it like this. Okay, so you see this wind barb is going this way, right? And then from here, let's go back towards the NAM here. And you see there's a wind barb going this way. Already with this just alone, we already have our low level shear, and then the winds in the higher levels are going this way. So you already have three different directions at different heights. Again, directional shear, speed shear, everything there that you don't want to see. So we watch this moisture go in, and all three of the models are pretty much showing a similar level of moisture, getting into the 60s. Some areas even flirting with 70-degree dew points. So It's not too much to see there that we haven't already seen. Here's the NAM, just in case anyone hasn't seen that video. Similar look. And then the GFS as well. We can switch that over. If I can get it to work. I'm starting to have more and more GFS. Well, it's just like my old school computer did. But yeah, pretty similar look all across the board here. So the next thing to take a look at here would be the cape values. And then we'll go ahead and take a look at the precip type here. A couple of things to note here as I'm looking at these. The only two that have the mixed layer cape like I like to look at are the Euro and the NAM here. I like looking at the mixed layer cape over the surface cape because I can look at all levels of the atmosphere and how much energy they will end up having versus the just the surface like the GFS will show. Not to say that that's not useful, but I like to take a look at the atmosphere as a whole. It's also partially why these videos end up being a little longer. But I'd rather be thorough and make sure that I'm seeing everything before I present it to you guys. That being said, let's go ahead and look at the cape. And this is another concern as to why we went up to a slight risk across this region. Not the most impressive cape values I've ever seen, but notable enough. And lo and behold, look at these two corridors that I'd been calling out. Getting up to a 1,000 plus joules, getting close to even 1,500 in some spots by the time we get into early Wednesday afternoon. And across Mississippi, we're seeing the same story here, getting close to 1,400 joules per kilogram. Then watch what happens as we get into Thursday afternoon or Thursday evening. Well, actually, that's weird. I was seeing something a little bit more impressive on the Euro earlier. I don't know what's going on with this. But also another thing to note is the global models often tend to be a little bit more troublesome when it comes to getting a look at the cape here. So it's going to be a little. This is a little bit wacky. It's not unexpected, but I was hoping I'd see something a little more consistent. But you do see better cape returns on Friday too, though, which I find kind of weird. But even so, nonetheless, cape value is in great abundance as we head into Friday with this main line of storms here heading above 1,000 joules, even getting above 1,500 joules. When you get to about 2,000 joules, that's an explosive environment, and we're not far away from that. The best time to really look at cape is really about a day or so before the event. Personally speaking, because we have the convective models, which are excellent at picking up cape detection. Although the last year or so, I will say the global models have been better. Cape's a little bit more widespread as we look at the NAM, and this is a little bit closer to the convective type models, similar to the NAM 3 kilometer. But those higher cape returns still aren't quite there, but they are a little bit more notable than what we saw in the Euro here. NAM's a really good model for this in particular. But we're definitely getting, in fact, right over here, we actually do see 2,000 joules per kilogram. And this is towards southern Indiana. I think that's a little bold, but can't rule it out. Dang, I have so much phlegm in my throat. But that being said, pretty robust environment develops here for severe weather. And then look what happens over here. This is a little bit more like what I was seeing from the Euro about a run or two ago. I don't know why that has changed a bit, but large area where we're sitting above 1,200 plus joules per kilogram. A lot of areas where we're getting above 1,500. And then we start to lose that. We get a good cape return by Friday afternoon, getting above 1,500 joules, and this is right over my area, sheesh, or just to the south of it. So definitely a lot to watch here for sure. And for good measure, we'll look at the surface cape. Try to have the time frame up for you guys. Look at the widespread amount of cape that the GFS has here. Again, this is the surface cape, so this isn't what's going on in every level of the atmosphere like with these other ones. So the cape values could be a little high, a little bit higher with this, but that is still a concern in its own right. simply because if we have that kind of energy available on the surface, we could have a lot more problems on the ground level. When we look towards Thursday afternoon, it's a pretty similar deal to the other models, even though this is at the surface. It's pretty even right now. We'll look at Friday. Surface cape isn't quite as impressive, but is still very notable, and we're still getting above that 1500 joule mark all the way until that storm heads offshore here. So some pretty nasty stuff might be ahead here from the looks of it. I'm really hoping somehow we see a bit of a downtrend here, because this could be a very dangerous day. Last thing to look at here will be the precip. And we'll start out with the Euro. This will be also our look at our winter storm Quest, most likely. So here's Quest over here causing. Would that be? Oh, that's a gender neutral name, honestly. I'm not gonna get into that controversy. But you can clearly see right here, Quest takes its push further and further to the south here. We look at Arizona. We look at New Mexico. That snow squall that I saw in yesterday's video is still showing up here. So that much hasn't changed. Here is our severe threat heading into tomorrow afternoon. Multiple modes of storms. Could see damaging winds and tornadoes with that. And then as that goes away, here comes our next round as Quest starts to really deepen over Texas. Heading into Thursday night, here's that line of storms. And interestingly enough, on the backside of this, even though I think this is a little bit bogus, there's a little bit of a rain and snow shield that develops almost as far south as maybe Wichita Falls. This could be a little bit of sleet that falls briefly, possibly. I'm not really on board with that, personally speaking. And then, interestingly enough, some of these same areas that got severe weather last week, towards the end of this week, may even see a little bit of frozen precipitation. I do think for a lot of these areas towards maybe central Mississippi, you might see a brief period of changeover between sleet, snow, and then eventually you're going to shift back over to rain. We've been seeing more of a northerly trend with this low, so this is also going to anticipate maybe a bit more of a snow shield ahead of north of the Ohio Valley. Looks like you guys are getting stiffed over there again. We'll have to see how this low pressure ends up moving around as time goes on, because these tend to wobble a bit. These are a lot like tropical systems in a way. So it's going to be hard to tell who gets what really in this situation. But that's what we have going on with the Euro. The NAM paints a similar picture with the severe weather. Maybe a little bit more impressive looking, but the snow threat is still the same all across the board there. In fact, but an interesting thing to note here is with the NAM, we end up seeing that low pushing a little bit, taking a slower chug to the north here, and this could end up giving a larger part of Missouri here and Iowa a longer period of snow, actually, instead of just sleet or freezing rain. And the warm air takes a little bit longer to advect across this region, so that snow lingers for a little bit longer. This also gives birth to a ice thread across some parts of the Great Lakes here towards Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. So a lot of moving parts with that, and then we could even see sleet and ice possibly over New York City as we head into Friday evening, before eventually changing over to rain. And then last but not least, a look at the GFS. It's going to be a pretty similar deal here. Again, the main thing that we will be looking at as far as the precip is concerned is going to be where that low ends up moving. Because wherever that low ends up moving, that's where we're going to end up seeing a battle zone really start to develop here as far as the sleet and the ice here. Heavier snow is actually possible with this one on the backside of it, as plenty of moisture still seems to be very abundant across this region, even as the severe threat ends. But the ice threat still remains here, but some heavy snow could be possible on the southern tip of Michigan here, through Chicago even, and a small portion of Iowa, but it's nothing like what the NAM was showing. So in this one, it's like you guys are getting stiffed over here towards the Midwest. We already know about our severe threat. Just from looking at the other dynamics there, we could kind of figure out what we could expect. But the question mark we now have here is what's going to happen with this storm as we roll this forward. We see increasing ice potential on the northern fringe of the mountains here, maybe towards the Poconos even. And then we'll watch this change over to snow here, and we'll fluctuate between that and rain for a bit before maybe changing over to all snow and watching this close out the week. So, a lot going on here. You're going to probably get a live stream out of me at some point. Which day? I'm leaning mostly towards Thursday, maybe Friday, but we'll see how things progress. Maybe I could do one tomorrow. We'll see. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it was another long one. Just a lot going on. I'm trying to cover every end that I can. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, you already know what to do. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that bell to make sure notifications are on, because whenever the weather's active, that's when I especially tend to post. And then, of course, share this video to anyone that could be dealing with either severe weather or winter weather. Make sure that they're prepared. Be a good friend, be a good neighbor. But take care of each other. I'll see you guys in the next one. This has been Ty, Metalhead Weatherman. I'll see you guys very soon, probably in the morning. Till then, have a good night.